Hello and welcome back to the Chaplains Compass podcast for Interfaith Chaplains. I am Elise Tremaine.
And I'm John Betts. We have a great treat today. We're really excited because we have two excellent and professional chaplains with the United States Army Institute for Religious Leadership. Chaplain Mark Lee is the Dean of the Graduate School and an ACPE certified educator. And Chaplain Ibraheem Raheem is the program director for the Army Institute's School for Spiritual Care and CPE. And he's also an ACPE certified educator. Welcome to the Chaplain's Compass, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you here. You know, personally, I work with you both on the Army side, and I really wanted to make sure that you were able to talk about the great things that are happening within the Army CPE program at the graduate school. But first, I'd love to have people get to know you and who you are. So what brought you into chaplaincy, and how has your role changed to where you are today?
I think both of us have pretty lengthy story or interesting stories. But mine actually goes back to when I was a college student. In my sophomore year in college, when I was an Army ROTC cadet, I had lost my scholarship. And they said, "You're done, you're out." And I could not even finish the program. So this is the 1980s where we had RIF going on. And I was just obviously devastated. And I remember my college group pastor asking me, "So what other ways of becoming an Army officer?" And I was like, "Well, I could go to law school and be a JAG officer, go to medical school and be a physician. None of those things are interesting. I'm not going to do that. And of course, there's chaplain, but who the heck is going to be a chaplain?"
Who are those people?
He said, "Why don't you think about it and pray over it?" And that came and went. Fast forward, I was a young banker, and I got the call to ministry. Then I went to seminary. And during seminary, there were people who were there to recruit for the chaplaincy, all the various branches. And I thought, oh my goodness, I had completely forgotten that chaplaincy is a way of serving both my calling as a minister and also perhaps in the military. But I kind of explored it, didn't work out. Then I went and finished and went back to Hawaii, where I was getting a call from one of the churches there. And on my ordination day, my very good friend and her family came. Her parents, whom I knew since high school, were there as well. And her dad said to me, and he was a full-time employee for the Hawaii Air National Guard as a lieutenant colonel at the time. And he said to me, "Mark, I need you to join the chaplaincy in the Guard." And I'm like, "You know my story. God did not open these doors for me, and that's not going to happen." And he's like, no, I want you to talk to the recruiter as soon as you come back, and we're going to get you in. And one thing led to another, and that's how I got into the Air National Guard as a chaplain. And then fast forward a couple of years, that very same year I got commissioned into the Air National Guard, 9/11 happened. And of course, the world changed. And for a few years, I really contemplated the strong desire to be with soldiers as I saw pictures coming from the desert and heard stories about ministry happening out there. And I explored the various branches of military. And when I talked with a Army chaplain stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, he told me about the hard life of being a chaplain, but the rewarding aspects of being an Army chaplain. And he sold me after 2 hours of talking to him. Came home and told my wife, "I think this is what God's calling me to do." It was not taken very well, but fast forward, almost 20 years on active duty, here I am.
Wow.
And I think the role I have seen myself in from, of course, the battalion level, brigade, and then over the years, I got introduced to CPE and the route to becoming an educator. And so where I am now, overseeing all of the work of the graduate school and as an Army chaplain, but as an educator of ACPE, I think my role now is really focused on the future of the Army chaplaincy, educating and developing future chaplains and future leaders, really, of this corps.
Yeah, especially it's such a a unique calling within the Army because it's not required to become an Army chaplain for you to have any clinical pastoral education, but it certainly benefits the people who go in with CPE or receive CPE while they're serving as chaplains.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's why. Well, and Ibrahim can talk more about that. But the demand for CPE and extended CPE that we have in the Army just continues to grow. So it's a wonderful thing. People are realizing the value of it.
That's great.
My story is a little bit different. I enlisted into the Army as a private, and I was hopping along, just a happy young soldier with not a care in the world until a crisis happened. And I noticed that there were chaplains there with us as young enlisted men that were there for us. And me and other friends went to them and found great, relief and great hope through that channel of resource that was there for us. And it didn't really dawn on me how important they were. I was in the medical field and I was a nurse working in the ICU. And we had done everything we could do to save this patient. And we got to a place where we called in the chaplain. We told the family, hey, we don't expect this patient to live by the next morning. So you may want to come in and pay your last respects and things like that. And then the chaplain came in with that family. And it was just full circle that the role of the chaplain was so important. The moving part for me was this patient took a turn for the better. They got better and better and better, and they walked out of this ICU down to one of the less critical wards. And I couldn't get out of my head that this change didn't happen until that chaplain came in and ministered with his family and prayed for this patient. And it seemed so miraculous to me that from that moment, the patient started getting better. I'm the nurse, and I'm sitting there watching this patient get better and better. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? This idea that God could do more, right? And do things that we can't do. And then from that moment I started to feel like I had a calling to do something in the ministry, right? And I was curious and I started asking questions. And eventually I learned about the chaplain, how to become a chaplain. And then I guess there was one other pivotal moment for me because I eventually found my way into what we call the chaplain candidate program and then eventually accessioned on as a chaplain. But this whole idea of CPE didn't register until I had a brigade chaplain. Some of you might know him. He was just beating it into my head because I wanted to be like him. He was a brigade chaplain. He had all this stuff together and he was figuring out all the issues with soldiers. And I was like, well, what's your secret? And he was like, well, I had CPE. You should get some. And this brigade chaplain then is now our chief of chaplains. And he is the biggest supporter of what we do here at the graduate school. And I'm forever grateful for him to kind of model that for me and also encourage me to go get that training. So he's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I hear one commonality, at least one, maybe more in the stories that you told, which is for you, Ibraheem, was being able to experience directly and indirectly the care of that chaplain. And for you, Mark, it was sitting and listening to that chaplain tell their direct experiences and personal stories. Sometimes it takes really experiencing the kind of care that chaplains can provide to feel that tug and to understand that calling. So that's really neat. But for both of you, am I right in understanding that your CPE experience has all been in the context of the Army, or did you ever attend a program outside of the Army?
I did CPE while I was in seminary, although that was particularly not a CPE. They are a CPSP accredited program. And so when I was in seminary, my presbytery said, you will do 1 unit of CPE required for ordination. I'm like, what in the world is CPE? So I looked around and they had a CPE program and part of the field education experience. So I did that for the academic year. And it was such a life-changing, transformative, life-giving experience at a psychiatric hospital. So I was really, really excited. And so when I graduated from seminary, I had to do an ACPE unit because my presbytery wouldn't take anything else. So I just said, well, why not? I like CPE. So I went and did a summer unit in Hawaii with Pacific Health Ministries. I volunteered for a psychiatric hospital again, and I did it there, and just really gained so much of my own identity as a chaplain. Overall, everybody, we all understand the benefits of CPE. So then when I came into the Army and they had the residency program, I'm like, sign me up. I want to do that. So that's what I did. And then my educator then said, hey, you should think about becoming a CPE supervisor, as the term was back then. I said, no, not only no, hell no, I'm not doing that job. 6 years later, I'm like, yeah, I think that's my calling.
I know when I was doing my CPE residency and I would get those calls, well, actually before the residency, the internship, when I had to pay for the education rather than get any stipend, and I would get those middle of the night calls and I would have to rush to the hospital. My husband would say, how much are we paying for this again? Like, why are we doing this again? I wonder if you had like a similar experience when you were going through your training.
Yeah, I mean, both John and Mark may recognize the Brooke Army Medical Center experience of trauma duty, and how when you're on call, at least you were able to be home with your hubby. We were stuck at the hospital and sleeping in a hard bed in a sleeper room. And, that pager would go off all night. And I still would have a call from my wife saying, you sure you want to do this CPE thing? Because it takes you away from home all the time, all night and stuff like that. But yeah, I do resonate with that, because it took some soul searching to understand the role that chaplain has to be there all night, whatever people need. And there is a sacrifice associated with that. And so once I was able to sit well with that, then it became a little easier to do. But initially I was like, I'd rather be home in my own bed, cuddled up to my own wife, and not doing this. But yeah.
No, I can join that subgroup. Mark and I, we actually met when I was doing my internship, Madigan Army Medical Center. And the sleeper room, and it was a new experience all around. And at the same time, it was one of those situations where you had a great opportunity to meet people who were civilian, military, and just a unique opportunity to meet all kinds of people.
My experience was actually a combined, right? So one of the reasons why I decided to do with the psychiatric hospital when I was still in seminary was that they were like, hey, we actually pay you to be a student. I'm like, okay, sign me up. And then, of course, for the summer unit, I had to pay them. And I was like, okay, well, who's going to help pay for this? So I had the presbytery cover some of it, and I covered some of it. But in the Army, of course, it was like, man, I get to do all this learning for an entire year and get paid as a captain back then. And I got a D-min out of it. So I was like, great, this is wonderful. Except, of course, it did hinder some family time. And there's some tension with that. Those are some of the intangible costs, especially being in the military.
What I remember most in terms of the fulfilling part of it was that there's nobody else, no other chaplain on duty. When you're on duty, you're 100% of the spiritual care that they're going to get in these very difficult times that these people are going through. And so that made it worthwhile for me.
And I think if I add to that, strangely enough, and I think this is just maybe my personality, as much as I hate being woken up by that beeper, and I hate the sound of that beeper even till this day, but I love the excitement of the trauma room. And I love all of the unknown and all of the chaos and the tension and jumping right in there to care for the patients and for the patients' families that come. That just really excited me and the fulfilling part of the great ministry.
What would you say might be unique about the Army's CPE program compared to other similar programs? Are there special benefits or challenges to this program in the Army?
Yeah, Mark kind of laid out some of it is that, you're being paid while you're going through this program, and it offers the D-min. But I think one thing that's often lost with Army chaplains is it is a professional development course. It's making you a better chaplain and officer while you're going through our unique design of the CPE program.
Yeah, so really the uniqueness, I think, for us comes in a couple of different ways. One is a lot of the civilian CPE residencies, I think, have gone to 3 units And with the 1 unit prerequisite, we offer 4 units in 1 year. And often we have students, it's a mixed bag. Often they're not at all experienced in CPE. And we're getting more and more now who have 1 or 2 units. Sometimes we got people who have had done 2 residencies prior to the Army. I think, though, what is really unique about our program is that we really focus on the professional development, as Ibraheem said. So we're really looking at the holistic development, particularly in the last unit before the chaplains graduate and go back to the larger Army, is that we focus on leadership and the integration of everything that they learned throughout the first 3 units of CPE and what that means in terms of being a professional Army officer and chaplain, being particularly focused on the issues of speaking truth to power, because their commanders are always 2 ranks above them, how to use systems theory to read the room and speak those issues to the commander. So I will often tell our residents that we're not here to create good hospital chaplains. The hospital is the educational environment from which best learning happens, but we're really concerned with making them great chaplains who can serve anywhere in the Army in future assignments. I think for me, as I see our program, the biggest challenge is we don't necessarily get to interview our students and the applicants before they're chosen for the residency. And we're just speaking just strictly for the resident program. It's different for the extended program. So we get students who are selected by an Army board full of chaplains who review their files. And so that means we get top quality chaplains, and yet the educators don't get to sit necessarily and be a part of that. We do have at least 1 educator and a couple of people who have done CPE as part of that board, but that board is not necessarily prior to selection. So, and that's where the challenge is sometimes. And then, of course, we are in an Army that is demographically slightly askewed, primarily largely males and largely from more conservative or evangelical groupings. And so that diversity can become a challenge once in a while too.
Yeah, and I would just caveat with that is it's not an in-person board. So we're not evaluating the selectees based on their preparedness for CPE as much as their performance as a chaplain and an officer in the Army. So we could get a great candidate, or we could get someone who's an excellent chaplain or officer and not so great CPE candidate. And so we have to work with whatever we get.
No, I imagine that could be quite challenging, especially with the unique calling and the unique role of doing clinical pastoral education, because there are some chaplains in the military where I meet them and I go, "You're an amazing staff officer. You know paperwork, you can handle the rank structure, you can deal with a lot of things behind the scenes," but they're not really all that pastoral or spiritual, and it is the opposite, where some people are, they're great with establishing rapport with people. They're amazing with connecting with the soldiers. Sometimes their leadership is not too excited with them because they're doing that, but they're not doing their administrative duties. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that is a great way to capture it, John. And I would throw in the other challenge that I think we haven't talked about is the subordinate chaplains are seeing the educators rank and maybe even their peers rank, and it's affecting sometimes the process of group development and interacting with leadership. And what we've learned to do in our program is to take that and use that to the students' advantage and teach them how to work with higher ranking officers.
And it's also interesting because in the military, you also see what a person's religion is by what they're wearing. For example, you have the crescent on your shoulder as a certified educator, whereas Chaplain Lee has the cross. Have you run into some unique situations like that?
A lot of people are not familiar with my insignia, so they're wondering who I am, what I do, and I use that as an opportunity to joke with them and say, well, I'm an astronaut, and it just blows them away, and they're like, if I'm out in like a field environment, I will say, yeah, I'm here to inspect the MREs. And so it helps me, kind of get in the door and help them understand that, I'm actually a chaplain and we have different insignia, and it's a teaching moment. But yeah, they don't recognize it a lot of times. And I use that as a way to kind of offer some education around it.
You got to make sure those MREs are halal. Otherwise,
Yeah. Well, no, but there's a crescent moon on the boxes. And so people see that and they think, oh, he's here to, so.
What about you, Chaplain Lee? Have you run into some interesting situations?
Not so much because of the cross. Most often people recognize the cross as the chaplain. I think some of the maybe more challenging ones, not from my perspective, but from people who are of really minority faith group, like the Unitarian Universalists. They have to wear the cross because there's no other symbol for them. And that for some, it can cause a discomfort or consternation because they're like, this is Christian and it's not representative of my faith. And so, and I can understand and hear that. And yet, what do we do? I mean, we're in an institution where these are the limited symbols of different faith groups. And if it doesn't fit into one of them, well, you wear the generic one. And so I can also see the need for the military to kind of explore more religious symbols. But then out of 200 and some odd different recognized religions, do you have everything available? I mean, so those are some challenges, I think. And I've come across those kinds of questions from some students. And then, of course, from conversely, those who are a bit more theologically conservative say, wait, you're not a Christian to some of the other faith groups, and you shouldn't be wearing the cross, kind of. And so it kind of goes back.
It's a double-edged sword. Like you want to be grounded in who you are and stay that way as you then move into a role as a chaplain who is there for all, right? Unfortunately, some people just get stuck with just their foundations and they never come to the reality that they're not here for just themselves in that particular denomination. They're here for all the people that they are assigned to. So it's helping people kind of make that shift into chaplaincy work, which is going to be standing firm and well-grounded on who you are, strong enough so that you can now be there for others, right? And a lot of people don't get there. And I think CPE is a way to help a lot of chaplains kind of tackle that hurdle.
I was wondering, as you talk, I've always worked in the healthcare system, and I know that for healthcare chaplains, sometimes there's a sense of feeling separate from the team, not fully integrated in the team, or feeling a little distinct from other team members. And I'm wondering if you ever feel that as an Army chaplain, do you feel fully integrated with others, or do you ever feel separate from, and is that a good or a bad thing in your experience?
From my experience, it's always a both and. Whether it's within the hospital setting within the Army, or if I'm in any kind of other units, right? So whether be it infantry or medical or wherever, I am always a part of, because the Army's culture is that everybody has something to bring and we're all part of the team. And so I have a particular role and responsibility to play no matter where I am, as whatever echelon I am at that level. And yet I am not a line officer. I am not a medical professional. So there is a sense of somewhat of a distinctiveness or a separation. I'm not quite part of their little enclave culture. And so I think it's just understanding that, where do I belong? Where do I not? And how do I make myself? And that's really, I think, the work of the individual chaplains, to figure out how they need to maintain who they are as a religious professional, and knowing when they belong to the unit to be fully a contributing member of either that unit or the team, the interdisciplinary team of the hospital, whatever setting it might be.
Very well said, Mark. I would just say that becomes the art of this work, of chaplaincy work, and this idea that we need to be separate instances so that we can speak truth to power, so that we can address issues of ethics or, other concerns that come up, so that we're not so embedded or wedded to the command that we can't bring forth what they need to know. All of my commanders kind of led with, hey, I appreciate the fact that, somebody's going to pull my coattail when we're going down this slippery slope. And yet, as Mark was saying, we do need to still be approachable. We still need to be integrated, as Alice pointed out, so that we are in the know of all the things that are happening around us, but not so far out there to where, we can't be related to or in touch with or anything like that. So it is an art.
What I've seen also, the separateness has been beautiful in that because we're non-combatant, we cannot touch weapons. People always ask me, hey, do you fire weapons? And I say, if I fire a weapon in my uniform, I get fired. So my endorser goes, you're not doing that, don't do that. And part of the reason is we have our religious affairs specialists who are the enlisted team members and in joint areas, like if we're dealing with people in a joint outside of just the Army, it's a religious support team. They help with administrative pieces, but they also carry our weapon. Like, we don't shoot anything, but they're ones who are staying and providing that kind of support to us. So I always found that very interesting, is because people see that we're not qualifying. We're able to just be present with them while they're qualifying with their weapons. It could be some of the most boring times as a battalion chaplain when everybody's qualifying and you're just sitting there talking, but it also is the best time to, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Can you show me what you're doing? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a great point. We have to pick and choose our location where we're best served, right? And some people are just fine with the range where others are challenged by that exercise, right? And some people are not that good at it. So we can be encouragement, we can be inspiration for those who are trying to get over the hump and just qualify. Others are kind of, really shaken up about the range and firing weapons and stuff like that, and we can help them too. So, but we have to be consciously aware of where our best position and place to be based on what's going on in our battalion or brigade or whatever.
What would you want civilian chaplains and ministers and imams and rabbis to know about your unique role as a military chaplain?
I like to joke around a little bit to kind of loosen up the fear and the misconceptions that are out there about us. But I point people to the initiation that Jason Bourne went through, where he's being waterboarded and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he's like, he just keeps enduring the punishment and says, yes, yes, yes. And eventually he comes across. But a lot of civilians don't know the shift that you have to make to kind of be in a lot of discomfort and make some sacrifices, move and travel and all these, go deploy. And so just if they're interested in this type of ministry, just giving them all the information they need to be prepared for it when they make that shift. And then if they're already doing great things in the civilian world, share with us those best practices and those trends so that we can learn from those things and bring those into what we do over here in the military. Overall, our goal is to be the presence of that denomination and that spiritual care that soldier or family member won't get if we're not here. And so if there's things going on in the civilian world that are better and up to date and, working, we would like to have long-term relationships and conversations with our civilian colleagues to make sure we're staying up to date.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the key things that I like to address with our new chaplains or chaplain candidates when they come through and I have a chance to speak with them, I highlight the fact this is not your parish, not your synagogue, or your mosque. The United States Army Chaplain Corps is a place where we bring who we are, but we must meet the people where they are and who they are, regardless of our faith background. So it works well for my theology. For me, I encounter everyone as a child of God, regardless of where they come from. And I don't necessarily need to jeopardize my own faith, and I don't need to impose my faith on the other. And so that's an important fact, I think, for chaplains in general to grasp. that this is not your particular religious group that you're ministering to, or this is not the mission field. That's another important thing. And I think what's also very important is I am both a religious leader and I am an Army officer. I have the rank on my chest and my religious symbol. Both are there to remind me. And of course, my religious symbol is a little bit higher because I serve a higher purpose. But that's not to say that one is more important or that I should lean one way more than the other. It really depends on the circumstances, depending on what's my role, that I need to make sure that I can balance between the two, being the colonel and being a chaplain. And if I added a third leg, maybe, is I'm remembering that I am an Episcopal priest. And so I have that calling. I am an Army officer, and I'm a religious professional in that organization called the United States Army. So it's the constant balancing of all those identities and roles, and I hold them sometimes in tension, but oftentimes I try to hold them balanced with one another. And I think that's very unique in the military that civilian chaplains or local clergy persons would not get.
I think that's very well said. And as you were talking, also made me think about all the different layers of identities and crises that people are encountering. I've been thinking, Ibraheem, you were mentioning the dislocation and being away from family. That in itself is a crisis. And when you add to that, perhaps any health crisis, but also helping people who may be experiencing violence in some way. My husband is in law enforcement, so I know a lot of times he experiences some really difficult things. And I'm trying to imagine what that might be like in the military and how you find it helpful to help people who are going through several layers of different crises and how you care for yourself in the midst of that, because you're experiencing that too.
Yeah, and I think a big part of being a really good chaplain is just being able to move into a space of empathy, understanding. For instance, you mentioned your husband, the kind of things that he has to do day in and day out, just trying to sit with that for a minute as a chaplain who was trying to support a person like that. First, you have to understand how rough it is to be in that person's shoes, and then try to say, okay, well, if I can have empathy for what they're doing, what they're going through, then I can be there for them. And oh, by the way, in the military, you also are going to have your fair share too. And so who are you utilizing to maintain your, well-being and place of solace in a person who ministers to you or gives you, what you need when you're almost at your wit's end, and yet people are asking you to give. So just staying in touch with those realities, I think, helps ground us as chaplains.
And going with that, what I love about the unique calling of being a military chaplain is that when you're mobilized, you're going with the soldiers, you're going with them, you're experiencing the same frustrations and joys, but you're in the middle of that. So you're alongside them. It's similar to what you described, Ibraheem, about when you go to the trauma bay and everybody's on the same page in terms of we're here to do a job, we're here to take care of the patient, and the chaplain's there to provide staff care, but also patient care and family care. And you both, I've not been mobilized, but you both have been deployed. Am I right?
Yep.
In terms of that, do you have any experiences you would want to share about providing for soldiers when they were deployed?
Oh gosh, that's a whole nother podcast.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
I think that ties into Alice's question earlier too, especially in the Army. And I can't speak for the Air Force or the other branch, Navy, but we go, like you said, John, we go with our soldiers. We are part of the unit that goes. And so one of the challenges of being in that environment or in really helping people through any kind of crisis is we're sort of all enduring it together. So I need to make sure that I am spiritually and physically, mentally, emotionally well, and I can have then the reservoir to give to others and help walk with them through whatever crisis that they're working through. So that's really the joy. The difficulty, again, you're enduring the same separation, same bombing, same shooting, same mortar rounds, same difficulties everyone deals with in combat experiences and even the aftermath. And so to recognize that the chaplain is not superhuman or beyond any other's capabilities, it took me a long time to recognize that I needed some counseling and therapy after my first deployment, and then subsequently years later, ongoing therapy, because I'm the chaplain. Gosh, I have it all. God is with me. I should be able to provide these supernatural powers and whatnot. And that was a hogwash. And that took a lot of hard work on my part and really some humility to acknowledge that I needed external help as well. And yet what keeps me going, what feeds me, it's my own faith, especially as an Episcopal priest. For me, it's very important to get the Eucharist and find my spiritual grounding. So those are helpful things.
Yeah, very well said, Mark. Hard to add to that, but I would just say that, a lot of what we do when we're not deployed is theory, right? What we will do, what we might do, right? And then when you get there, it's not always what the theory says, right? It's something different. And you have to figure out now, taking what you know, what you've been trained, and some of the theory that you are supposed to be doing, and fit it into what's really needed here and now. And the challenge for chaplains is they get stuck in the theory and they don't know how to adapt to what an actual combat scenario might offer them. And so they don't know how to adapt and adjust and say, hey, well, this happens in the civilian world as well, where, okay, how you function in your normal clinical environment, and then all of a sudden there's a mass casualty event that happens and it's totally outside of what you're normally functioning in. But can you adjust to that need at that moment, taking what you know, and then also using what you need to do in this moment, which is totally different, and maybe it's going to affect you a certain way, and can you still function, right? Can you maintain that original belief you had in hope and in faith? And now those things are being challenged right here, right now, and yet you're still trying to be a positive for that community that you're working with.
Absolutely. It makes me think about certain rituals that people have, gone to seminary and talked about what baptism is, for instance, and when it is performed and how it is performed. And then you get into a healthcare system and something happens and you're asked to perform a baptism and all that goes, you're having to really struggle with that as a CPE student for sure when those things happen.
That reminded me of when somebody was talking about, we had one patient where this patient was bedbound. I remember thinking, oh, how do you do immersion with somebody who's bedbound? Well, am I going to? Nope. I'm just doing some sprinkling because I'm not getting a Hoyer lift just for a baptism. That's exactly an experience that I had as a hospice chaplain. Well, going with that, ACPE, which, it's the gold standard for CPE, it's changed its processes over the past decade. I remember just hearing some of the changes from, it used to be the name, even the title of certified educator is new. It used to be CPE supervisor when I was going through CPE. But now those who are providing the CPE education, less of a supervisor and hierarchical role and seeing it more as educators and coaches. So how has that affected your program with all those changes that have taken place?
I would challenge the fact that a lot of civilians think that in civilian CPE, there is no rank, there is no power differential, that we're all colleagues. That is utter BS. Unspecified, very intangible, but very noticeable power differential between the educator, even when you call them educator versus students or residents. There is this power differential. And I think it's actually not helpful for people to play that down. So in the Army, we, as Ibraheem mentioned earlier, we don't do CPE in civilian clothes like the Air Force or the Navy does with their civilian contracted educators, because our folks need to go back to the big Army. So they have to learn to work with the dynamic that is present visibly and invisibly in the rank. Power differential exists. So I think our students learn how they gain their own authority and power with regard to the hierarchical difference. So I think that we position our students better to work with leaders who are sometimes 2 or 3 levels beyond them for that. And I think, the titles have changed, but basically it's helpful for us to recognize that there is always some kind of power differential. So even when they're providing care to their soldiers or to the patients, we always talk about the power difference, right? That the patient who is dead bound has less power than a chaplain who is walking, and or even, just a chaplain's presence there. They're in a different power dynamic. So I think that's helpful for us to name and not play down. And again, we work with it in our Army system.
Sometimes the patient can be a colonel or general, and if you don't have some familiarity with working with this difference in power and still being who you are and able to offer genuine ministry, then you're not going to be able to help that colonel or general. If you're a captain, you're just going to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and, it really not be a helpful chaplain. But if you can do what Mark's talking about, you will be comfortable with that power differential and still offer meaningful ministry in those contexts. And the other thing about that, John, the changes, I think everybody resists change on some level. But the truth is, in order for us to stay credible with the Department of Education, we need to keep up with what's changing in education. And so a lot of this is just a testament to ACPE trying to stay relevant and trying to stay current with the educational models that are working. And we just, even though it's painful, we have to adjust and adapt to make sure we're being relevant and up to date with our educational process.
And if I may add to that, nothing's perfect, right? So accept the fact that nothing is perfect, we have faults. And I like the new way, especially with the new outcomes and indicators, because it takes so much of the subjectivity of the educator, and not that it's completely gone, but it puts it on the second level. And so we try to kind of put in the foreground a bit more objectivity to the learning, which honestly in the past, depending on the kind of educator you had, could be very damaging for some. And I think this sort of levels the playground, and it allows for, again, less subjectivity to get in the way and hinder the process. So I think I like that overall.
Where do you see the future of CPE, and where would you like to see it go?
That depends. Are we talking Army context or overall?
Yes. Where do you see chaplaincy going in the future?
CPE is the best friend of chaplaincy work, right? It's going to keep us relevant. It's going to keep us current. It's going to give us the added skills that we need to really be good chaplains, right? And again, my emphasis, I want to leave with the chaplaincy, is understanding this shift that a good denominationally trained religious leader comes into the Army, understanding that they are supposed to be 100% that and represent their denomination well, but understand that there's a shift that they need to make, that this is not their congregation anymore, and they need to be here for all and be a professional chaplain, meaning they're integrated into their organization very well. And so I think, to me, those are the things that we need to make sure we continue to emphasize with Army CPE. But I think that works the same way in civilian world as well.
Yeah, we sound like a bunch of old men now, Ibraheem. We're talking about legacy. I think if I can address like CPE and chaplaincy overall, and then maybe a little bit more Army specific, I think CPE overall is in a good glide path. ACPE a bit more education focused. As an organization, I think we've gotten so interested in sort of the business model of CPE that as a whole, and maybe it's because also the budgetary constraints, right? They've reduced staff so much that, we have to run on volunteers. And so there's some conflict there, I think, because I think we can do both, have a really efficient organization and get the focus really on education. So I'll leave that there for ACPE. As a chaplaincy overall, I think I'm glad that we are really talking a lot about research competencies, right? Evidence-based research that supports chaplaincy, because that's what we need. It can't just be based on, well, my faith tells me this or my gut tells me that. I think we need more of that. So it's, again, a balance of good research-based support for chaplaincy overall, wherever we may be. And that's my hope, is that we can balance the spiritual, the emotional, and the academic all together. The thing specifically for Army chaplaincy, I would like to see CPE become a larger part at the formative years for battalion chaplains, so that eventually we get to a place where CPE is available for all brand new chaplains, 1 unit extended CPE. And because that's just so critical for the formation, right? Identity forming as a chaplain in the Army. Because in 1 unit, that's basically what we're working on, is self-awareness, who you are as a person, what your religion, all of these things. And so I would like to see us as an Army CPE program to get to that place where every single battalion chaplain that comes into the Army will have the opportunity for at least 1 extended unit of CPE.
Yeah, and in my school, in support of the Dean's vision, we also offer the short courses, which if people are not fortunate enough to get that unit of CPE, they get some of the short courses that are some of that forming agent towards that first unit, right? They're learning what they need to learn to prepare them for that first unit.
That's great. And does the short courses does that include like the moral injury course and the combat medical ministry or emergency medical ministry course?
Yes.
Wonderful. So out of curiosity, I would love to hear, we always love to finish with this. What's giving you life these days?
This morning, our dean, he gave us life by, infusing us with coffee and donuts. And so it's hard to be sad when you got some donuts in the house. So that's one of the things. But also, we just finished a CPE symposium where we brought all of our centers together in the nation's capital. And it was very well done. And Mark's leadership was a big part of that. He brought in a great speaker, Carrie Doring, and that I'm still riding high from that symposium and some of the things that came out of it. So that's what's got me really bubbly right now.
Yeah, I sometimes have to really wonder and ponder the question of what's giving me life. Strangely enough, I am like really doing the both and today. So my work sometimes sucks the life out of me, and my life often gives me life. And the sucky part really is, as I think about it, is when I let others' worries or anxieties or the negativity sort of suck it from me, because I really overall enjoy immensely what I do as the dean, and I've always enjoyed doing CPE. So that, being with people and being with people who are learning, exploring faith and leadership and spiritual care, all of those things. And I'm an academic, so I love talking about theology and reading about theology. So those things all give me life. I think what sort of sucks it from me sometimes is just the things I have to do, right? Being part of a bureaucracy and a hierarchical system. So, but yeah, the energy is really on what the potential is for the future and for our students. So, yeah.
I love it.
Well, thank you both so much for talking to us, because I feel like for me, and hopefully for our listeners too, it's given us a greater appreciation for what you do. And also it makes me feel really hopeful to know that there are chaplains like you and CPE educators like yourselves in the Army, because I can tell you're both so compassionate and thoughtful in what you do. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to express some of this stuff. We've been having this stuff bottled in, and there's no medium to share with the bigger world. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I echo that appreciation for allowing us to be a part of this. And I would just plug in that, in the Army, right now, we've got 7 certified educators, and we are building even more. And we're the only branch of the DOD that has our own educators on our own system, 3 different resident programs. Yes, because the Air Force and the Navy, they rely on civilian contract or an agreement with the VA to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I believe that I've been blessed working with you both. And I thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the great stuff that's happening at the Institute of Religious Leadership and the grad school and the School for Spiritual Care and CPE. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the non-anxious presence with Elise
and John. I was really excited to hear a lot of what they had to say about their role and their wisdom as very experienced officers, but also chaplains in the Army. I mentioned it before that I'd worked with them some, and I met Chaplain Lee. It was just really funny to see how it's come full circle to working with them again and the great work that they're doing over at the Institute for Religious Leadership.
It really did give me a greater appreciation for all that they navigate and help others navigate in the Army, and to think about the chaplains who are training at their institute or program, how they're training to be both chaplains and officers, and how to work within that system in the military, which has made me be more thoughtful about the healthcare system and how I have learned and have had to learn to work effectively within a system that can feel a little foreign to us too in healthcare or whatever context that chaplains come to work in.
Yeah, I when they were talking, I definitely thought about working within the civilian healthcare organization where I work, where you have different levels of power. You could have the CEO, the CFO, all of these SVPs, senior vice presidents, and EVPs, executive vice presidents, and everyone with all these titles. But you go into the clinical realm, you can also run into people who, you have surgeons, you have the other doctors, you have specialists, you have attendings, nurse practitioners, you also have the residents, and people who have all these different levels of power that they're operating through. And what does it look like as chaplains walking into those spheres of influence and being able to advocate on behalf of the families, advocate on behalf of the patients? And in the military scene, how do we advocate for the lower enlisted? How do we advocate for making sure that what we're doing is ethically, morally correct? How do we speak the truth to those situations?
It's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, sometimes chaplains feel like we're low on the totem pole of organizations and systems. You know, if we need to make cuts, typically chaplaincy departments are vulnerable to that. And in a lot of ways, I think chaplains feel disempowered. But in some ways, we also have a unique kind of power because we're the ones who hold the access to, like I'm thinking healthcare specifically right now, where my badge as a chaplain gives me access everywhere in the hospital. And that's very different from most people who, would not have access to the surgical floor or to the CCU unit or to the break room, where we are talking with folks in housekeeping. And then on the same day, we're also having meetings with the president and the vice president for something else. And then we're talking with doctors, debriefing after a call situation. We touch everyone in a way. And being separate from the medical team as a different clinician can be difficult sometimes. It can be painful sometimes and lonely. But in some ways, it also does enable us to speak truth to power and to be able to be advocates, as you said.
Yeah, and one of the areas the Army, the Canadians have been working on this very well. Is we did some joint training with Canadians years ago, and one of the things that we learned is this idea of external advisement, where we find out what is going on. We will learn more about those places where we might be going, find out about the culture, the local religious leaders, the customs, and how do we, as chaplains, advise our commanders of how to make sure that what the mission is doing, that we're not only potentially not causing more heartache than we have to, but also how do we make sure that we're providing the kind of care so that we can partner with local populations rather than a colonizing effect. How do we partner with them? One of the pieces that is fascinating is meeting with the local religious leaders and saying, hey, what's happening? How can we support you? And then being able to tell our commanders, the XO, so this is what the local population is talking about. These are some of the issues. So I recommend that we do X, Y, and Z instead. Being able to do that, you're in such a unique way to provide that kind of care so that we are life-giving. We are within such an operation. We can help make sure that we are winning hearts and minds, as well as, the military is about winning conflicts. So
it reminds me of a conversation that I had with the president of the hospital where I worked when I was the chaplain manager of our local hospital, where he told me, I really rely on you to know for the pulse of the hospital, to know what people are feeling, what they're thinking, what they're experiencing, because as an administrator, there was some distance for him. And I was someone who, like I said, really was able to speak to everyone and to see what everyone was experiencing at a really ground level.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful being able to speak the language of the people you're talking to, being able to say, hey, this is what my department needs, and here's why it's going to be, we're not revenue generating, but we are value added. So in spiritual care and spiritual health, how does that benefit their organization? And here's some studies, and here's what my chaplains are doing. And here, let me tell you more about the great things that are happening. But also, here's some simple stories of how we're interacting with patients and how we provide resilience to your team members, to the staff. And that's what I love about the military is you have that integration as well, where you're out there, the chaplains see, oh, that's my chaplain. They're ruck marching with me. Oh, that's my chaplain. They can't fire a weapon, but dang it, they're out there, and it was 0 degrees Fahrenheit out there. They were out there in their sleeping bag, in their rucksack, in their sleep system. They were enduring the suck with us. And so there's that, to use the Christian term, there's the incarnational aspect of ministry, but really it transcends the religion. In fact, it's people, it's the common humanity of the ministry that we do.
Yeah, well said. And anytime we are caring for someone in whatever context we work in, there is a power differential too. And we hold power over the people that we serve in some ways. So it's good to be cognizant of that. So one blessing today that I thought would be relevant comes from John O'Donohue from his book, To Bless the Space Between Us. And it's a blessing for one who holds power. May the gift of leadership awaken in you as a vocation. Keep you mindful of the providence that calls you to serve. As high over the mountains the eagle spreads its wings, may your perspective be larger than the view from the foothills. When the way is flat and dull in times of gray endurance, may your imagination continue to evoke horizons. When thirst burns in times of drought, may you be blessed to find the wells. May you have the wisdom to read time clearly and know when the seed of change will flourish. In your heart, may there be a sanctuary for the stillness where clarity is born. May your work be infused with passion and creativity and have the wisdom to balance compassion and challenge. May your soul find a graciousness to rise above the fester of small mediocrities. May your power never become a shell wherein your heart would silently atrophy. May you welcome your own vulnerability as the ground where healing and truth join. May integrity of soul be your first ideal, the source that will guide and bless your work. And blessings to all of you who have listened to this episode and also any episodes in this first season. We have really enjoyed hearing from you, and we hope that you will take a couple seconds and leave us a rating. It really does help us to reach more chaplains with this podcast and to continue to produce content in the fall. So if you can, please leave us a rating, leave us a review, share this episode, like, and subscribe.
Yeah, and we would love to hear back from you regarding feedback, ideas that you would like to see for future podcasts. It's been wonderful to hear just the encouragement and the ideas that have been coming through this. So if you will, call us and leave us a voicemail at area code 502-536-7508. That's 502-536-7508. Thank you so much.
Bye.